Hi everybody, it's time for we're rebooting this whole thing! Steampunk reviews, all that. Sort of, kinda, not really. I'm still gonna review stuff. It's not just gonna be steampunk stuff, it's gonna be a lot of different stuff because my opinions have evolved a lot. That was kind of the thing. The thing that happened was, as mentioned before, my computer crashed, but after it crashed, I kind of realized I like things other than steampunk, and it's like, how am I supposed to express that to the rest of the world if I'm just going to focus on steampunk stuff? So I'm still going to review steampunk things, and they will still be marked specifically steampunk reviewer, but I'm going to be reviewing a lot of other stuff too. So today we're going to start with something that I didn't enjoy for a change of pace, because that usually leads to more humor when I don't like things. And specifically, you have to remember, I'm a history major. History is what I studied, history is what I do. And so I liked 300, but I appreciated that it was kind of full of shit. It was an interpretation. I do appreciate that. I'm not the kind of person who is super anal about accuracy, for the most part. Films can rarely get the degree of accuracy that is necessary to really portray a period previous to our own. I mean, the closest I've ever really seen somebody get to it is pretty much HBO's Rome, or maybe the Borgias. Those did pretty damn well for their period, for all things being equal. But, 300, it's an interpretation. I roll with that. But here's the thing. The thing I'm going to talk about today is 300 Rise of an Empire and how much that movie sucks! Excuse me, I suspect I blew out a couple of speakers right there. You might want to unplug your headphones if that's the way you're listening to this, because I am angry. And the reason I'm angry is pretty freaking simple. And the reason I am mad is because this is a movie that has the bone structure of a really good movie. And then whoever fleshed it out completely fucked that just completely up. It doesn't work any longer. And allow me to explain why. Okay, so the entire opening sequence of the movie is this explanation as to it's basically a backstory for Xerxes, and he introduces this new character, Artemisia, whose full title, as I will explain as we continue, is Artemisia of Caria. You introduce these two characters, and suddenly it's actually really interesting, because suddenly Xerxes he has a beard, he looks normal, he's actually reasonably attractive. This is different. He's a guy who's been driven mad by the death of his father, who was killed by Greeks. Suddenly it all makes sense. He didn't just descend upon this world, golden and gleaming, nor did he pop out of his mother with all those piercings. There was an origin story here. This is a great thing. Villain origin stories are often some of the most fascinating, because they actually allow you to understand things better. So that's great! I was so excited! And then they introduce Artemisia, and you have to understand, Artemisia is basically one of my favorite historical figures ever. She's fascinating. I'm going to get into more of that why. More of why she is that way, as we continue. But the reality is that they give her this interesting backstory where she's Greek, and her family was completely destroyed by the Greeks. And now she seeks revenge on them, because the only person who's ever shown any kindness to her were the Persians. Suddenly, oh my god, you have moral ambiguity. This completely changes the game from 300. The whole thing, and a lot of people complained about this in 300, the whole thing about 300 was that it seemed to paint the whole idea of West as perfect and noble and strong, and East as la-da-da, wear makeup and coal and drink too much, and quite possibly participate in orgies. And that's the thing. Creating a concept in which the Greeks are in fact flawed, and not simply in the they were paid off by the Persians kind of way that we saw in the first movie. The fact that the Greeks make war on the Greeks and Greek citizens are a casualty thereof is huge. It's a huge storytelling step. It's great. I love it. And then everything goes to hell. It goes to complete hell. Allow me to explain why. Okay. Backstory. Primarily, I'm going to be talking about Artemisia for the most part in this, because Artemisia is the linchpin of this. And note, I don't blame Eva Green. I was so excited when I heard they were going to have her play Artemisia, I just about came out of my chair. It was perfect. She's genius. She's so good. One of my favorite actresses of all time. I couldn't be more happy under those circumstances. And she looks awesome, and she acts awesome, and everything. But why am I mad, you ask? Allow me to explain the real story of Artemisia of Caria. So let's bounce back to a couple hundred years BC to the Battle of Salamis, which is the entire fixation of 300 Rise of an Empire. Backstory. Salamis is basically an aquatic thermopylae. You'd think that the Persians would learn about this, but they don't. They continuously, and particularly Xerxes in his case, engages the Greeks in a bay, shaped something like this, more or less. If you'll notice, there's only one way out of this circumstance. That's these suckers right here. That would be the wall of the bay, and obviously that's not going to work very well. So Xerxes doesn't really care, though, so he summons all of his commanders, and they all show up. Among those commanders is Artemisia of Caria. Artemisia was half Crete, or half Cretan, Minoan. She wasn't actually Minoan in the sense of the Minoan Empire, but every time I say Cretan, I hear Cretan, and that, as in Cretin, as in stupid, which confuses me. Anyway, so she's half Minoan, Cretan, whatever, and she's half Carian, which the Caria is more or less what would have been like a suburb of Turkey nowadays. It was a very small plot in what we consider Anatolia on the map. She married the king of Caria, bore him a son, the king dies. So, of course, like many queens before, she's queen regent until her son reaches maturity. So when Xerxes sends out the call for more soldiers, she answers the call. She shows up on their doorstep, or not on their doorstep, she shows up to the battle, and she has, like many of the king's advisors and the other vassals of the Persian Empire, they all show up to Xerxes to have a big military strategy discussion. Here's the thing. Xerxes, there's a lot exaggerated about him in 300, but from what little we know, this was a very proud man. It's hard to deny that fact, and it's certainly not somebody who I personally would walk up to and say, this plan is bad and you should feel bad, you know? This is not a Zoidberg circumstance. You can't do that to Xerxes. And you want to know what? Artemisia does. All of the king's advisors are saying you can't lose this battle. You are completely invulnerable. You are awesome. You are a badass. And what does Artemisia say? Artemisia says this is a stupid idea. This bay has one exit point. We've already seen this shit happen before. Why don't you just pull back and cut the Greek supply lines? They'll have to retreat back to Greece. They'll start fighting with one another because that's what they do. And that'll be the end of that particular story. All you have to do is just send in a couple extra troops. They'll fall apart on their own. You won't have to do anything to them. That's what she says. She says this to Xerxes' face. And what does Xerxes do? Does he execute her? Does he get angry at her? No. He actually straight up stands up and says, that's a really good idea, Artemisia. You want to know what, guys? Listen to that. That's a really good idea. Unfortunately, we're still going to do what I said before. So, thanks, but no thanks. So Artemisia, she's a loyal subject, at least for now. We're going to get to why that's subjective in a few minutes. Artemisia goes down, she gets in her trireme. She brought 5 of them, by the way. That's a pretty considerable amount, just by measuring stick for a small, satrapy, so that's impressive. They all get down there, they get in the battle formation, and immediately shit starts going wrong. Salamis is just a aquatic clusterfuck. No one can get out of it intact. And Artemisia sees everything going completely pear-shaped, belly up, and she decides, you want to know what? I've got a kingdom to rule, of my own. I'm not going to die for some Persian king's stupid military decision. And so she looks around and she sees there's the bay, and she realizes she can get out. There's only one thing in her way, and that's not even an enemy vessel, that's a friendly vessel. So what does she do? Does she ask them to move? No, Artemisia ain't got time for that. She rams the boats that are in her way and gets right the hell out. She escapes into open water. Meanwhile, Xerxes, who's up on a hill, he's watching all of this because he can't be bothered to actually be involved in combat. He sees all this going on, sees Artemisia frag her teammates, essentially, and assumes that she must be attacking enemy ships, and states, according to our sources, that my men have become women and my women men. And so, the fact is, nobody ever contradicted him on this point because nobody in the ship or ships that Artemisia ever rammed survived, so that was never a problem for her. She escapes into open water. Now, she gets out there, and suddenly there's a ship on her tail, and here's the thing. The primary combatant forces, as discussed in 300 Rise of an Empire, are the Athenians. They were a big deal because they're primarily they're a navy state. That's the big functional point of them. And the thing is, Athens doesn't really like uppity women all that much. I mean, you can argue that there's not really any culture that's super great about ladies in armor, but the fact is the Spartans didn't have a problem with this, but the Athenians did, and the idea to the Athenians that a woman had gone to war against them, oh my god, they were pissed. They were mad. They wanted to take her as booty, take her back to the city, and prove that no bitch can fuck with Athens. But here's the thing, Artemisia sees him coming up on her tail, so what does she do? She drops the Cryan flag, and she immediately raises a Greek one. And because the Athenian Greeks apparently have their heads, somewhere that's not on their shoulders, see that and assume, oh, it's a Greek vessel, we'd better get back to the battle. So they turn around and leave. Artemisia, meanwhile, manages to get back to land, rendezvous with Xerxes, tells him, you want to know what? You should just go back to Babylon, there's a rebellion there that you need to quell. I'm just going to go back home. You just leave one of your second-in-command out here. He'll take care of it. If he wins, it's your victory because he's your servant. If he loses, it's not your problem because he's your servant. So there you go. Xerxes goes back, quells the rebellion. And in Babylon, Artemisia goes back, and I'm going to give you 4 options for what happens to her. 1, or A, she is killed by Xerxes because she attempts to usurp his power. 2, she is killed by her subjects because she's a tyrant. 3, she is captured by the Athenians for the wrongs done to the democratic state. Or D, she lives happily ever after. Now, under any other circumstances, I would generally pick either A, B, or C, but the reality is that Artemisia is lucky as hell, because she, as far as we know, got D. We have no records after that point. She essentially just disappears off the face of the map, and the reason I think that she either died of sickness or old age, or some combination of the above, is if the Athenians had known that she died in any kind of way that they would have deemed ironic, whether it was from, being betrayed by the Persians, or killed by her subjects because she's not democratic, or, or the Athenians had the great fondness of actually killed her or caught her in some way, they would have written about it. The only thing instead that we get about her is this sort of urban legend that states that she fell in love with some guy, and she went to an oracle, and the oracle said that he'll never love you, and so she threw herself off a cliff. Yeah, that definitely happened. That sounds like a plausible thing that occurred. Yeah, horse shit. That's just what sore losers say, especially when confronted with a woman who beat their ass. No, that's, she lived. She lived, she fostered a couple of Xerxes' kids, she died of old age, passed the crown to her son, end of story. Bye-bye, see you later. So that's the story. Obviously, this is taking me a while to explain. Now, allow me to explain in the next couple of minutes, I'm going to try to keep this as short as humanly possible, as to why the movie is so stupid on this front. So let's establish something. We've already established that the Greeks aren't perfect, we've already established that Xerxes is interesting, and Artemisia is really interesting. These characters are great. And so what happens instead? No! None of that gets played out. Does Xerxes actually do anything? No, he just kind of sits there and is sort of a figurehead. And he's a figurehead to a woman who is established as essentially a pulp fiction Darth Vader, in that they state that she is the head of the Persian Navy. And yet she behaves like a Saturday morning cartoon villain. She continuously sends in her strongest and her next strongest combatants to go and try to take out Themistocles and his ever so, noble Greek army. And of course, each time the Greeks win, and they win over and over again until she summons him, or Artemisia summons Themistocles to try to understand him and seduce him over to the Persian side. And she tries to seduce him via sex. Big fucking surprise there. And why? You've already established this is an interesting character. Why is she behaving like every bad trope of villains, and especially villainous women, on the face of the planet? You could have have him come over, if they're gonna have sex, they have sex just because she wants to have sex with him, or he wants, because they want to have sex with one another. And then you have them continue to fight. You don't have to have her trying to seduce him to make the story more interesting. You just don't. Furthermore, you don't have to have her act like, kissing severed heads. What exactly is your point there? Is it that she's, sort of like this death, what death, sort of like a Freudian death wish come to life? What's the point here? Obviously nothing productive, because you continue after, Themistocles, who is a noble, virtuous, democratic Athenian man, rejects the wiles of the sexy, Eastern witch. or bitch, as the case may be, she immediately comes at him with, like, her whole frickin' army. And this is the only joke in the whole fucking movie. He basically states, he quotes, "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned." Yes, that's a productive thing to say about a military commander. Sure, that's why she's actually going to war with you. The very fact that this is an established point and supported by the story is absolutely stupid. Why are you doing that? Artemisia's a good commander not because she's angry because you didn't sleep with her and come to her side fully. She's not even actually, in a good character setup, she wouldn't even be angry. She's just going to war with you because you're her enemy. That's kind of the setup here. But no, we have to have women be all emotional because somebody rejected them. Sure, dandy. Not a good story. And here's the thing, you get finally to the end of the story, and spoilers, Artemisia goes to fight against Themistocles. There's actually a reasonably good fight scene, and then he basically just stabs her in the gut and she dies. It's the end of it. And that's dumb. You want to know why it's dumb? I'm going to give you a couple of reasons. One, you could have had, because at the end of the film, the Spartans finally show up in their ships, which baffles me, because while the Spartans did have some ships, they didn't have that many. The Spartans show up, and you've got Queen Gorgo there. Now, over the course of the film, they've already established that Queen Gorgo and Artemisia have a hell of a lot in common. Like, a hell of a lot. Like, these are two women who are completely driven by vengeance. Why the hell are you not going to let Gorgo kill Artemisia? That would be so great. Because then Gorgo is, it's the time-honored, almost Miyazaki-esque story of how vengeance serves nobody. Why the hell aren't you taking that? Okay, fine. So you've already got that. So that's option one. Option two, Artemisia escapes like she does in the original story. Because then, the fact is, the movie ends more or less in the middle of the fight. Why not have her escape and have her come back in whatever the next movie is, presuming there's going to be one? It's interesting and it's historically accurate, so that's a reasonably good setup for later function. That means you can get more people to come to the theater and spend money. Not a bad thought. Or three, there are ways, if she had been established as a stable, across-the-board type of character from the beginning, it wouldn't have been such a problem that she didn't beat Themistocles. But because, again, she acts like a really, really stupid Darth Vader the whole time. And I mean really stupid. I mean, again, I use Darth Vader as an obvious point just because of the whole, you have failed me for the last time element, which is very present in Artemisia. But, honestly, Darth Vader is a fairly complicated villain. He's pretty interesting, as opposed to Artemisia, who's just like all of, like, the stereotypical traits of Darth Vader boiled down and stuffed into a female shell because why? So yeah, it's dumb. It shouldn't exist. It's bad. And it gets even worse when you realize that Themistocles, you want to know what Themistocles did about who's been established in the film as being so noble and so democratic and so devoted to his country and all of that. You want to know what he did a couple of years after the Battle of Salamis? He defects to the Persians. Never goes back. Lives a good life. It's the end of it. But here's the point. I don't blame Themistocles for what he did, but I do blame the filmmakers who think that he's anything that should be used as a supporting point for democracy. I'm going to, dare I say, raise my eyebrow aggressively at them. Observe. See, it's going up. So that's the point. That's the point. You've completely... And why does it matter? Some people might say, again, it's an interpretation. Here's the thing. Unlike in a story that's told a little bit differently, nobody gets hurt if you're telling a story differently. But when you really actively misportray historical figures, and not enough... I mean, it's one thing if you portray a historical figure who's kind of not so flattering by the standards of today's day in a more flattering way. It makes them more accessible to a different audience. But when you take a figure who is fascinating and interesting, and you dumb her down into a stupid, emotional woman just for the sake of being able to create that Eastern foreign decadent witch stereotype, then you suck. I'm sorry, you suck. You are defaming the name of an absolutely spectacular female military commander who was smart and ambitious. I mean, you can disagree with her choice to ram another ship to save her own life, but the fact is, she was tough. She was in it to survive. And throwing her under the bus to make a stupid movie in which all the men's abs are airbrushed on, making that the way that most people are going to remember her in this particular day and age, that's vile. That's vile. That makes me angry as a historian. That makes me angry as a woman. That makes me angry as everything that's, as on absolutely every single freaking level. You had a great story here that you could have told. And you chose, not you, I'm sorry, not you, viewer, they chose. They chose to make a story that could have been great really, really bad. And that's all I've got to say on the matter. I can answer comments about it, and, comment, subscribe, all of that. Give me some suggestions. I'm going to be continuing these. This is, currently I have a Tumblr now. Look up reviews from the Lighthouse. That's my new handle. So if you've got any things that the Lighthouse should review, please feel free to send them, and I'm happy to talk, discuss, so on and so forth about all of this. Except for the airbrushed abs. They're still really, really stupid, and they're really bad in Rise of an Empire. I could forgive them in 300, but Rise of an Empire, they aren't even trying. Okay. Bye-bye.